I've got to start with a confession, because when I first suggested this topic to Desley late last year, I understood that Centenary Place had opened in 1924 and that therefore we'd be celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. And a centenary of Centenary Place had a nice ring to it. Imagine my chagrin when during the course of my research I discovered that the park was actually constructed, well, it began construction in 1924. It was actually opened in 1925, 99 years ago. So I guess we have two options now. We can either adjourn early for afternoon tea and I can come back sometime next year and give you the century story, or I can just push on and pretend that it's actually, the topic was always 99 years of the park. So are we happy to push on? Yes. Okay, good. I was hoping you were going to say that. So, here we go. Centenary Place, Centenary Park, Centenary Place Park or Centennial Park. It's been known by a few different names over the years, but its official name is Centenary Place. Now, originally I wanted to talk today about Centenary Place as a standalone topic, but in history, of course, nothing's ever that simple. And when I was visiting the BCC archives recently and I had a chat with the archivist Annabelle Lloyd, it made me realise that, as I said, it wasn't quite a simple topic of just talking about a park. Nothing ever happens in isolation. And nothing happens in isolation. To understand why the park was first proposed and why it was built, where it was built, we must first understand something of the public debates about Brisbane's future that occurred during the first quarter of the 20th century. One of these debates concerned the merits, of course, of amalgamating the area's cities, shires and divisional boards into one greater Brisbane City Council. And whilst there were various acts from 1878 on, when the first Local Government Act was passed, and there'd been several parliamentary inquiries into potential amalgamations, it was not really until the 1915 state election campaign that the major parties committed to enacting the concept. I'm going to go forward, haven't I? Let me go forward. There we go. There we go. The election to Labor government under Premier Thomas Joseph Ryan paved the way for the passing of the 1920 Local Authorities Act. This also extended the voting franchise to, well, I think they were just men originally, but it was all adults, and decreed that all mayors and aldermen would be elected by popular vote every 3 years. And the 1924 City of Brisbane Act, which formally created the Greater Brisbane City Council from, I think, 20 existing cities, shires and divisional boards. Now, the long debate leading up to the creation of the Greater BCC is a topic for another day. But suffice to say, it helped focus the minds of politicians and town planners about the kind of city that we wanted to aspire to. Now, other factors were at play during the first quarter of the 20th century which directly impacted on planning in and around Fortitude Valley. There was a spirited debate, for example, over where to build Brisbane's new town hall, with aldermen and business leaders divided on the various merits of a CBD location versus a new site in the valley. And one potential site, which was purchased by council in 1903, was on the corner of Ann and Boundary Streets, adjacent to the eventual location of Centenary Place. The town hall debate was finally settled in 1919, when council decided on the current site, the junction of Adelaide, Albert and Ann Streets. But until then, the issue was very much alive and in the forefront of the minds of Brisbane's politicians and town planners. Imagine what that would have done to the city and the geographic centre of the city if the town hall ended up, as it almost did, in Fortitude Valley. Added to this, the council was actually considering where it should build future cross-river bridges. This map, which archivist Annabelle Lloyd alerted me to, is fascinating. Prepared in 1926, it shows council were considering building a bridge. As you notice, there's no bridge where it now is, but they're going to build a bridge between Kangaroo Point and New Farm. So you can see where that is at the bottom of the peninsula. And a series of ring roads to connect heavy traffic to designated industrial areas. Under this proposal, incidentally, much of the riverside frontage and all of the southern part of New Farm Peninsula, this area around here, would have been set aside for wharves, bulk stores and other industrial purposes. So again, a topic for another meeting perhaps. But increased heavy traffic through the valley would have been an inevitable outcome if this bold plan had come to fruition. Then, of course, there was the holy name cathedral, proposed by for the valley by Brisbane's Catholic Archbishop James Duig. Duig's vision, if realised, would have seen the construction of the largest cathedral in the southern hemisphere on the entire block bounded by Gotha, Ann, Gipps and Wickham Streets. Dewey took a close interest in the proposed park, and it's entirely possible that he and the cathedral architect John Hennessy actively contributed to its design. It's certainly no coincidence that the central path through the eventual park lined up with the steps leading up to the planned cathedral. Oops, where are my glasses? A final factor was the question of public parklands. Under Queensland legislation, while councils could set aside land for future, could set aside land, I won't need them, for parks and reserves, but the control of these remained under the state government jurisdiction until 1878. Giving councils more control over their parklands after this date coincided with a more enlightened approach to the benefits of creating new green spaces. The land for New Farm Park, for example, was acquired by the council in 1913, and it's the most obvious local example of this policy in action. I guess this is all by way of saying that design and location of Centenary Place was thus an iterative exercise with various options proposed, discarded or refined as attitudes towards green spaces changed, future road and bridge plans were devised and traffic implications were assessed. The park's proposed location in the valley was in an area surrounded by industry and within easy walking distance of the wharves and warehouses of Petrie Bight and the valley's booming retail district. It was envisaged as a green space within a busy commercial and industrial area, a lung for the neighbourhood, as one newspaper described it. But exactly where should it be built and how would it align with existing and predicted traffic movements? Several plans produced by council between 1917 and 1922 show some of the options that were considered for the road realignments around Petrie Bight. As you can see in this case, there was a provision for a public circus. I don't know if it was based on Piccadilly Circus in London, but it was going to be a public circus. And then there was this concept plan that was produced around 1917, and it was one of the options considered for the park. But you'll note that it's located a block south of the site that was eventually chosen. By 1922, the final location bounded by Anne, Wickham and Gotha streets had been determined, and the land that was previously earmarked for the possible town hall was sold off. As you can see, this is when they flogged off the land. As you can see in the bottom right of that schematic, that's where the land had been set aside for the potential of possible city hall. So they sold that land off. Centenary Place was designed by Council's Park Superintendent Henry Moore, who also designed New Farm Park and Newstead Park. Moore employed a formal design with defined layouts, garden beds, grassed areas and curved paths. And the gardens included specimens of poinciana, Canary Island date palms, queen palms, wine palms, weeping figs and white figs. Centenary Place required the resumption. This is unusual for a park when you think about it. Most parks are designed from, there's nothing there already, but in this case, there were buildings there that had to be removed. So one of them was the Union Hotel, and there were also some shops. These were at the southern end of the park's boundary. Some road alignments were also necessary, realignments. Warren Street between Wickham and Ann Street, for example, was closed, and Gotha Street was rounded off. In 1924, Brisbane was in the throes of celebrating the 100th anniversary of its foundation. So it must have come as no great surprise when Centenary Place was officially announced as the name of the new park. By September, the site had been cleared and the Daily Mail was describing the progress in excited terms. There's a quote. In a few weeks' time, the area will be handed over to Mr. Harry Moore, the City Council's Park Superintendent. Under his skilled direction, we may hope to see trees and plants and flowers in the not distant future, transforming a drab spot into a place of loveliness, which should prove a source of pride to Brisbane residents and of pleasure to visitors. In November, the same paper was reporting that there was all this activity going on around Wickham Street at the present time. Increasing gangs of men from the Brisbane City Council, the Brisbane Tramway Trust, because they had to realign some of the tracks, and on behalf of the contractor, are combining to turn what was previously a peaceful, quiet thoroughfare, disturbed only by the rush of bargain sales, into one where pick and shovel, crowbar and concrete mixer reigns supreme. An expected completion date prior to Christmas didn't eventuate, and some of the necessary resumptions were held up by legal action. But in the end, the park was eventually opened by BCC Mayor Maurice Barry in September 1925. Lights were installed in 1926, and the podium, archway and tramway office were designed in 28. Now, new parks these days are often, I think I'm right in saying, Vicky, they often incorporate mature plantings, don't they? Well, they didn't do that then, did they? I mean, The plants look a bit scraggly and scrawny, don't they? It's a very wide open park, but that's what it looked like in this postcard that was dated around 1928. Further improvements were made in 1938 when deteriorating asphalt paths were replaced with more durable concrete ones. The park was quickly adopted by many people who lived and worked in the surrounding areas. This classic State Library image depicts a group of card players in the park. I'm not sure whether you'd want to join in their game if they asked you. While the postcard from 1938 shows a number of people sprawled on the lawns enjoying the sunshine. Additional garden beds were planted between 1947 and 1950. So here's what Centenary Park looked like in 1950 on the left and 1956 on the right. You can see that the figs and the palms by then were growing pretty nicely. Turning to some of the features of the park. The T.J. Burns statue. Now, Thomas Joseph Burns was one of the more capable colonial administrators. He was born into a poor family in Spring Hill in 1860, but he proved a brilliant student. He got a scholarship to Brisbane Grammar. He taught school in Victoria and returned to Queensland to become a successful barrister before entering politics. In April 1898, he was appointed Premier, Chief Justice and Attorney General when he was only 37. Sadly, he died of pneumonia 5 months later. Now, such was the esteem he was held that a committee was soon established to arrange the commissioning of a bronze statue to honour his memory. Unfortunately, this proved a fraught exercise. Italian-born sculptor Achille Simonetti was commissioned for a fee of £1,800, but because Simonetti had never met Burns, the committee felt that his early designs didn't look enough like him, so they kept sending them back. Then there was some debate about whether Burns should be depicted wearing a frock coat that he wore in Parliament or his university gown. Then a rival sculptor, James Watts, offered to undertake the project for £1,000, a proposal which divided the committee members. Then Simonetti reduced his asking price to £1,400, which was accepted by the committee. Then the debate was reopened as to what clothes Burns should be wearing. Then Simonetti took ill and died. So they had to go through the whole process again. So the statue commission was eventually awarded to a sculptor called Bertram McAnell, who later became well known for designing statues, coins and stamps depicting King George V. Burns' statue was unveiled by the Queensland Governor, Sir Herbert Chermside, in August 1902 at the junction of Boundary and Wickham Streets. But somewhat oddly, it was positioned not on the footpath but on the roadway, as can be seen from this photo. Brisbane's continued traffic growth meant the statue's location in the middle of a busy road became somewhat problematic in ensuing years. A council parks committee proposal in 1918 to maybe plant some garden beds around it was shelved, but the creation of Centenary Place eventually provided the opportunity for council to relocate the statue to its present location in the park. Incidentally, Burns is the only Queensland Premier that has two statues, because the good people of Warwick, which was his electorate, they put one up there as well. The other statue, of course, is Robbie Burns, the famed Scottish poet and lyricist. Now, statues and fountains and other memorials are very common around the world. They've been set up by Scottish people in his honour. According to Wikipedia, there's more than 60 of them around the world. The idea for the Brisbane statue came from the president of the Brisbane Burns Club, Alderman Galloway. In 1888, he contacted the president of the Queensland Scottish Association, Thomas McElwraith, to suggest their organisations combine and organise the building of a Robbie Burns statue in Brisbane. The statue was designed by Samuel Willis. It was officially unveiled by the Governor-General in front of several thousand people in August 1929. Now, this photo from the State Library is dated circa 1929. It doesn't mention in the description, but I have a strong suspicion that it may actually show the crowds gathering for the unveiling of that statue. The total cost of the statue was £675. The Scottish community raised £150, but the vast majority of the funds, £525, were provided by the council. Three sides of the statue's sandstone plinth feature bronze bas-reliefs, while the fourth bears the inscription presented to the City of Brisbane by the Burns Club. Fun fact, statues of Robbie Burns are traditionally placed so that his back is turned on the church. He wasn't a big fan of organised religion. Burns' statue was positioned in accordance with this tradition, and had the Holy Name Cathedral been built, his back would be turned to it. For several decades, Burns' statue was a gathering place for Brisbane's Scottish community to celebrate Burns Night, which occurs every 25th of January, which is his birthday. In August 1989, assorted dignitaries, pipe bands and Highland dancers gathered to rededicate the statue on its 60th anniversary. Stonemasons had spent the previous few days cleaning both the Burns and the Burns statues. While Burns Night events are still celebrated every year, it appears the Burns statue in Centenary Place is no longer part of these celebrations. I did reach out to one of the Scottish organisations, but they didn't get back to me. They sent me an email about the dinner, but they didn't answer my question about, well, do you still gather at the park? So I don't think they do. Tramways. Given many tram routes past Centenary Place, it was natural that a Tramways office was incorporated in the design. The podium at the park's southern end forms the roof of what was variously a Tramways cash office and a lost property office, and is now an automatic traffic signal management centre. It's all locked off, so I've never been down to have a look. Vicky, have you been through there? Okay. In 1938, a tram waiting shelter built of Brisbane tuff was added to the Wickham Street side of the podium. And this is what the shelter looked like in 1960. The lady doesn't look very impressed. I don't know if it's because someone's taking a photo or because there's someone having a swig of a bottle on the bench. Air raid shelters. In 1942, the council began building dozens of air raid shelters around Brisbane in response to the Japanese bombing of Darwin and the perceived threat of air attacks. Many of these shelters were built in and around Petrie Bight, no doubt because its warehouses and wharves were seen as prime enemy targets. 2 air raid shelters were built in Centenary Place, one in Wickham Street and one in Ann Street. They were designed to hold 70 people each. And they were completed by June 1942. And that's what the air raid shelter in Ann Street looked like in 1950. But both shelters were eventually demolished by 1973. In 1963, Council agreed to a suggestion from the Queensland Women's Historical Association to place a plaque in Centenary Place commemorating the life of Captain John Clements Wickham, who was, of course, the colonial magistrate in the early years of the colony. The Women's Historical Association is, of course, still operating, and they're based at Mygunya House Museum in Bowen Hills. And the plaque they lobbied for is still in place, although it's a little bit worse for wear these days. Speaker's Corner. Between the early 1960s and the mid-70s, Centenary Place was a designated Speaker's Corner. It was a time when political activism was on the rise, and people from various political and religious persuasions used the forum to raise awareness of topical issues. Some of you of a certain age may remember the Speaker's Corner. Desley's already owned up to remembering that during this era. Interestingly enough, the park also was a meeting place for trade union rallies and various public demonstrations. Have a look at this one. That's a big crowd. That was a peace protest held on Hiroshima Day in 1962. Organised, I think, largely by the Communist Party. I found this in the Communist Party files. After the Speaker's Corner ceased at Centenary Place, the people of Brisbane had to wait till 1990 before a new location was officially made available by the council at King George Square. Various improvements and alterations were made to the park during the 1970s and 80s. In 1971, the council decided to do some remediation works. There were new public toilets installed in 1973. I'm not sure exactly what year the toilets were closed. They were still there as late as 1986. And here's a bird's eye view of what the park looked like in 1975. In November 1999, Lord Mayor Jim Sawley unveiled a sundial sculpture and a commemorative plaque at the northern end of Centenary Place to mark its 75th anniversary. I might just point out here in my defence, it seems council also believed the park had first opened in 1924. If you do your maths, I'm just saying. And in August 2007, Centenary Place was added to the Queensland Heritage Register for a lot of reasons. It depicts the pattern of Queensland history. It demonstrates rare, uncommon or endangered aspects of Queensland cultural history, like the steps, like the archway, the old tram shelter. It demonstrates the principal characteristic of a particular class of cultural places through its association with the work of Park Superintendents Henry Moore and Harry Oakman. It's important because of its aesthetic significance, i.e. the vegetation, and it has a strong or special association with a particular community or cultural group, mainly the Scottish and the Catholic communities. Finally, Centenary Place underwent some extensive refurbishment during 1999 and 2000, which restored much of the original formality of the park. So just to finish by talking a bit about Centenary Place today, I really like going to the park. I've probably walked through the park a dozen times in the last couple of months, just taking photos and soaking up the atmosphere. But often I'm the only one there. I've pondered this fact, and the fact that the surrounding area has changed greatly since it was first opened. Petrie bite walls have closed and the industries that used to provide lunchtime picnickers have long gone. One-way traffic now zooms past on either side, and the mature trees shield much of the park from the eyes of passers-by. Could this be why the park seems to be so little used? It's a bit of a case of out of sight, out of mind, perhaps. Then a couple of months ago, I was driving down Wickham Street when 50 or more kids on scooters went past me heading for the park. Naturally, I followed them, and this is what they were up to. Vicky, you might want to look away at this point. This is what they were doing. All right. I should get the middle one there. So they're having a great time. I hasten to add that no damage was done to the steps or the park, and after about half an hour, the scooter flash mob dispersed as quickly as they had arrived. But I must admit, I was very pleased to have witnessed the gathering. Perhaps I thought there's some hope that new audiences may yet discover and appreciate Centenary Place, a hidden jewel with a rich history. So thanks for the opportunity to speak on this topic. I'd just like, in conclusion, to thank the Council Archivists, Annabelle Lloyd and Zane Metcalf, for their help and advice during the course of my research. Thank you.